Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I will be going over all of the books that I have read in January and February. So let's get started. So I have read, I have started and finished 14 books between January and February. I've actually done really well. I had 7 books for January, 7 books for February, and I have DNF'd 3 over the past 2 months. So I'm going to try and go in order with these just to make it easier on myself. I do have a list pulled up on my phone, so that way I can try and remember everything and not get super mixed up. So a lot of these I covered in reading vlogs that have already come out, and I have my full thoughts on them as I was reading them. So I'm going to try and go through them fairly quickly, and I will link those videos down below as well. So starting off the year, the very first book that I finished was Wrath by John Gwynne. This is the 4th and final book in the Faithful and the Fallen series. This book was amazing. I loved it. So many things happen in these books that it's really hard to even begin to tell you about them. I know I've talked about them in previous videos, the first one being Malice, and they're just so good. This is an epic fantasy series that follows Corbin, his sister Cywin, and a bunch of other people, and some kings, princes. There's a handful of people in this book. They've got their whole little world going. But you get to know these characters really well, and you see especially Corbin and Cywin, because this book starts out when they're around like 15 or 16 years old, and it really follows them over a period of time, and you really see their growth as they mature, as they start to have like more romantic relationships, as they're learning things and having to face things that they weren't expecting to, and that they're having to kind of fly by the seat of their pants and figure things out. And this book was amazing. Like I said, this is the last book in the series, and this one I hands down gave it 5 stars. My only thing with this was that I almost kind of wished that there was an epilogue, because I finished the series and I wanted more. And I will bring it up again later, but there is also A Time of Dread. This is the Of Blood and Bone series that is also by John Gwynne. This is almost kind of an epilogue in its own right. Like I said, I'll talk about this one more later because I have read this. But this is set about 100 to 150 years later. So it's not quite an epilogue to this. This one is a very chunky book though. It ended up coming in at 685 pages. So this book is big and it's long, but once you get into it, you fly through it because you don't want to stop. You want to see what happens. You want to see how everything is going to play out. And you want to see these characters that you've been following so much. You want to see what's going to happen. And I absolutely loved this book. Now, the next book that I finished was a library book, and that was The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. This one is a romance kind of fiction novel that is set, primarily starts out in Iran, and it's following a girl who falls for a guy, and they're supposed to get married. But when they were going to meet up, he never shows, and she doesn't know why. And so 60 or so years later, she finds out that he's actually not too far away from her. And so after 60 years, she goes and she talks to him to try and find out what actually happened all those years ago and why their relationship fell through. This one was good. I gave it like 3 stars. It's not super memorable, and it is not, at least I didn't think so. I didn't believe it was super memorable, and it just wasn't really my kind of thing. It did make me cry. It was the first book that made me cry this year, and it was really good in the moment, but it's just not one that's super memorable, and so I ended up having to sit with a 3 star on that one. Now, the next book that I tried to read was also for the same vlog as the stationery shop, and that was my Judge a Book by the Spine video. And that was Innate Magic, and that was by Shannon Fay. I made it to about 140 or so pages into this one, and I had to DNF it. I had no idea where it was going. It felt like to me that it was just kind of all over the place. It didn't have a specific plot line that I could understand what the overall plot was, and it just seemed like a hodgepodge, and I just wasn't having a good time, so I did DNF that one. The next book that I read after that was Shark Heart by Emily Hebeck. And this was another one that was good, but it wasn't my favorite. I gave this one 3 stars as well. I can absolutely see why people loved this. It was a very unique take on diseases and having to cope with family members that are having things happen to them and you just don't really know how to do it. Did not care for the writing style. I thought it was very clipped. And because of that, I just didn't really connect to anybody. I didn't really care about what was going on. I thought it was a very interesting concept. I thought it was very unique. And what it was well written. I just didn't connect to it, so I had to give it 3 stars. The next book that I read was The Library of the Dead by T.L. Huchu. This is one that my husband bought me for Christmas this year because I was so excited to read it. I was really intrigued. I've looked at it on Amazon. I've looked at it in stores. And I was super disappointed with this book. I ended up giving this 2 stars. I hated the writing style. And this one is marketed as being an adult fantasy. However, I felt like it was very YA. It is from the perspective of a 14-year-old girl. And I don't know, I just didn't connect with it. I finished it because like right around 130, 140 pages in, I think it was, there was like one chapter that finally was like, okay, I can try and get behind this. But it just, I don't know, it felt like it was kind of scattered. It felt like the plot was just kind of messy. And like I said, I just did not vibe with this writing style at all. And I will not be continuing this series because, I mean, like I said, I gave this 2 stars. The next book that I read was another library book, and that was for my romance reading vlog that I talked about this, and that is Love at First Spite by Anna E. Collins. This one is following a girl who is supposed to get married. And then she finds out that her soon-to-be husband is cheating on her with their realtor. And so they were gonna buy a house together, and he didn't listen to her and buy the plot next door. So to get back at him, she buys the plot next door and decides that she's gonna build a spite house to block his views and just overall kind of piss him off. The architect that she gets from her company to help with building this house ends up being a new love interest for her. They kind of start to have a friendship and a relationship after, with all of this going on. And then she realizes the more that she's working on this spite house, the less that she really cares about how he feels about it. This one, I had a lot of fun with this one. I gave it 4 stars. It wasn't my all-time favorite, and it was kind of a petty plot line, but I did have a lot of fun with it, and I enjoyed the writing style, so I did end up giving this one 4 stars. I had a great time, and this was what really kicked off my romance vlog, was reading this book. Now, the next book that I read, The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic. This is by Brianne Randall. This one I gave 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this book. It was just a cozy fantasy about a girl who learns magic from her grandmother, and then they find out that her grandmother is sick, and there's other things that are going to come into play with that, and she's just having to figure things out, figure out what to do and how to cope with losing her grandmother. And I loved this book. It took me a while to get into it. I was not, which is why this isn't 5 stars. I was not completely hooked into this book probably until the other members of the family started to show up, and they started to have kind of a reunion of sorts, and it reminded me a lot of when I was a kid, and we would go back to visit my grandparents and my aunts and uncles, and we'd all have a big barbecue out at my grandparents' house. That way everybody would get together, we'd be able to see everybody while we were there, and that brought back a lot of nostalgia for me, and that's when I really got hooked into this book. So I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars, and I really, really enjoyed it. The next book that I read, and this is still in January, the next book that I read in January was The Sapphire Altar by David Dalglish. This is the second book in the Vagrant Gods trilogy, the first one being The Bladed Faith. And I gave this one 5 stars. I read this one last year, right around this time last year, actually. And I loved this book. It took me quite a bit longer to get through it the second time around because I remembered a lot of things that once I started reading it again, there were quite a few things that I started to remember. So I was just kind of taking it slower, getting through it. But I really, really enjoyed this one. I liked the growth in the characters over the course of this book. There's a lot of things that happen, a lot of things that change. And you get more of an exploration into the characters and their backgrounds, and I really enjoyed that. So this book, the first book, is about Cyrus, who, when he is a kid, he sees his parents killed in front of him, and he is a prince, and so he sees his parents murdered in front of him, and he vows that one day he will get vengeance. He starts training with a family that is a father and 2 daughters, and learns how to fight and is basically learning how to get his revenge on these people. Now, the one daughter is famous throughout the lands as being a hell of a fighter, and the other daughter is a god whisperer. So she can speak to gods that are the spirits of gods that have passed, that have been killed, and in sometimes she is able to take the form of those gods if they so let her. And this book is so interesting. There is more, it looks more into the god whispering portion of it, which was my favorite part in this book, was that. And it was a really enjoyable book. I gave this one 5 stars, just like I did the first time, and I really, really liked it. Like I said, this one was a reread for me, so I knew it was going to be 5 stars, but this was the last book that I read for January. Now, the first book that I read in February is The Slain Divine. This is the 3rd and final book in the Vagrant Gods trilogy. This came out January 9th of this year, and it was 5 stars. I flew through this book. I could not put it down, and I didn't want to put it down. It was amazing. This was such an epic conclusion to this series, and I loved it. And once again, just like with John Gwynn's writing, I finished this book and I was happy with how it ended. However, I just wanted more. I want to be able to continue to just immerse myself in this world and see what happens. He did say in the author's note of this book that he wrapped it up in a neat little bow to end off the series. However, he did leave it open-ended enough that if he wanted to come back later and revisit the series and do like a spin-off of it, he left that opportunity open for himself, which I really, really hope that he does. I want more. I want to see what happens with Cyrus. I want to see what happens with the crew. I just want more. I absolutely love this. This was hands down 5 stars. One of my new all-time favorite series, along with The Faithful and the Fallen. They're just amazing, and I cannot recommend these enough. If you like John Gwynn's writing, especially with The Faithful and the Fallen, I really think you should try this series. They are absolutely incredible, and I highly, highly recommend them. Now, the next book that I read in February, I do not have it with me because I loaned it to my mom, and that is Lucky Leap Day. That is by Anne Marie Walker. This is a romance book where the main character, Cara, she decides that she is going to go to Ireland for a long weekend trip. And she had just broken up with her boyfriend, And while she is there, she meets Finn, who is a local, and gets drunk, proposes to him on Leap Day, and they get married while she's drunk. And then she wakes up the next morning and has to fly back to Malibu. So she takes Finn with her and says, we can figure out an annulment or something once we get back to California, but I have to go back for work. And so this book is about them going back to Malibu and trying to figure out what they're going to do now. They are married and they don't remember any of it, or especially she doesn't. And she's just thinking, what the heck did I get myself into? So I absolutely loved this book. I started listening to this book on audio. I had it from the library physically, but I also took it back to the library physically and bought my own copy. When I bought my own copy, I read it from start to finish in one day physically, and then I went back and I still finished listening to the audiobooks. So this was 5 stars. I absolutely loved this. I loved Finn. He was the sweetest character. I loved their banter and just everything with this. I absolutely loved this book. It was my favorite romance that I have read yet, and I had such a good time with it. It was such a good audiobook, and it was such a good book physically as well. I went through, I tabbed the crap out of it, and so now my mom, when she does get a chance to read it, she's going to have all those tabs to look forward to. And it was just a really fun time, and it made me really happy that I was doing a romance vlog. And I did talk about that one more in that vlog as well. Like I said, I'm going to link all of these videos that I've talked about these down below. My camera died. Where was I? Okay, yes. So the last book that I was talking about was Lucky Leap Day. This one I gave 5 stars, and I had a fantastic time with it. I had so much fun reading this book that I had to give it 5 stars. In February was Practice Makes Perfect, and this is by Sarah Adams. This is technically the second book to her When in Rome series that she's writing, and I read this one having not read the first book, and I loved this. I gave this 4.5 stars. The only thing that made me take off that half star was just that I had kind of a hard time getting it fully invested in it. But once I had a fantastic time. It was so much fun. I loved the banter. I loved the progression of the relationship from a friendship that they started. And I had a really good time with it. I also really enjoyed the relationship she had with her siblings. I felt like they had some things that they needed to figure out amongst themselves. Just like any sibling relationship does. But they were always there for each other. Their parents passed away when they were little, and so she doesn't even remember her parents. And I really enjoyed this one. It was really cute. This one is about Annie Walker, who she doesn't know how to date. She is super awkward around people, especially guys, and her soon-to-be sister-in-law enlists her bodyguard, Will Griffin, to start just kind of hanging out with her and trying to teach her how to date. And in amongst that, of course, Annie and Will realize that they actually do have feelings for each other, and it progresses from there. But they also don't want to admit to that, because he's kind of a floater that he just kind of goes wherever and does his own thing. And so he's not up for commitment. And that is a problem. Like, she knows that. And so she's like, well, I'm not going to fall in love with you. Don't worry about that. And then lo and behold, of course, as is the usual fashion with a romance, when they say they're not going to fall in love with you, they do. But I absolutely loved this book. I had such a great time with it, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Now, I have 2 books that I DNF'd in February. The first one was part of that romance vlog, and that was Boy with the Bookstore, and that was by Sarah Eshvar Smith. I made it to about 106 pages in that one. I couldn't do it. I did not like the writing style. I felt like it was really juvenile. I felt like I was reading about sophomores in high school, not 30-somethings. So I couldn't do it. I didn't like it, and so I DNF'd that one. I also read about 114 pages in Tender as the Flesh by Augustina Basterica. I understand why people love this, and I think it's creepy and whatnot, but I was so bored reading this. I didn't care, and I was just so bored that I didn't want to keep reading it. It's not very long, but I had this for my intimidating pick, and it got to where I was just bored and I didn't want to keep reading it. So I did DNF this one. All right, so the next book that I read was The Spell's Love by Kate Robb. This one was about a girl who she breaks up with her boyfriend after, I think it was 4 years, and she was at the point where she says that she wishes that she could just pretend like she had never met him and just have, you know, him no longer be an element in her life. And her aunt says to her, well, we're drinking, and I actually happen to have a spell that could do this, and so let's try it. And so they do. And it sends her to an alternate reality where, in fact, she never met this guy that she dated. However, it also is the reason why she actually ends up never meeting her best friend and the repercussions of that. And she realizes she doesn't want to go through life without having her best friend in her life, and realizes that she is actually in love with him, and she did not know that. I gave this book like 3.5 stars, I think is what it was. I liked the story. I liked the writing style. However, the romance, to me, it felt like, because of the fact that she had a past with him in this alternate universe, but he didn't have a past with her, I felt like that was too rushed, because it's like she hangs out with him a couple of times and all of a sudden he's like, oh yeah, let's you know, hang out more and start dating, and I really have feelings for you. And it felt like it was too rushed to me, where he's supposedly falling in love with her. That felt like it was too rushed. The other side of that was also the relationship in this. I spoke about it in that romance reading vlog, that when it came to the sex in this book, I did not like it. I thought it was written, again, really juvenile, and I don't know, I didn't like it. And so that brought this one down to like a 3.5 stars, because I didn't like those aspects of it. It was still a good book. I still enjoyed it, but it just didn't sit right with me, and like I said, it just didn't do it for me. So the next book that I read in February is Woman 99. This is by Greer McAllister, and it is about a girl who is in her early 20s in the, what year is it? I don't remember. About a girl who's in her early 20s, and this takes place in the 1800s. I'm not sure exactly what year it was, but it's in the 1800s. And she wakes up one day, and she finds out that her sister has been sent away to an asylum for curable women. And she feels like it is her fault. What is her name? Charlotte. Charlotte, the main character in this book, she believes that it is her fault that her sister has been sent away, and so she decides that she's going to get herself committed to this asylum for curable women and try and get her sister out. I gave this one 4 stars. I absolutely loved the writing. Greer McAllister, this is the 4th book that I have read from her, and I absolutely love her writing style. It was done really well, and I liked the fact that, because like when Charlotte is being naive about going into this asylum and thinking that she's just going to be able to find her sister, tell them they're both sane, and just walk out the front doors without any trouble, she recognizes that she was naive in thinking that could happen. So she comes to that understanding. Like, she doesn't realize how naive she was going in, but she recognizes that with the more time that she spends in this asylum, she begins to realize, like, how could I have possibly thought that we were just going to be able to walk out of here? Which I really appreciate that, because that really annoyed me at the beginning of this book, that she thinks that it's going to be as simple as that. It really annoyed me. But she recognizes her mistakes as she goes through, and this book, like I said, it was beautiful writing. Greer McAllister really has a way of writing these books that even if they are slower moving, because I will say, beware if you do pick this up, it is a very slow paced book. It's very slow moving, but it's intriguing and you want to keep reading. It was interesting. Some of these women were not even so much curably insane. It was more just that they were an inconvenience, that their families or their husbands just didn't want to deal with them anymore. And as messed up and unfortunate as that is, it was a reality. And this book really was interesting in getting a lot of those different aspects. There were the women who did have problems, and then there were the women who were just inconveniences. And I thought this was a really, really well written, a really interesting and a well-rounded book. And I will continue to pick up Greer McAllister's books because there's just something about them that is so engrossing, and I just really, really enjoy them. So I gave this one 4 stars. The next book that I read for February was my very first arc, and that is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. I had such a great time with this, and I cannot wait for it to come out so I can buy a finished copy and be able to read it all over again. This book is going to be released on May 14th. I do have an entire vlog that is specifically for this book, for reading this book, as it is the first arc that I have received. Thank you to Orbit. And I loved this book. I thought it was really great. I said in that vlog that I would recommend it to those who enjoyed especially The Unfortunate Side Effects of Heartbreak and Magic by Brianne Randall. I also felt like it had kind of the cozy elements and like the light magic of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. My only qualms with this book was just it felt like it got a little bit rushed at the end, and there were some things magic-wise that didn't really feel like they were fleshed out as you got like to that 75% mark in the book. There's something that comes up magic-wise that it didn't feel like it was fully fleshed out and explained to me. However, I absolutely loved this book, and I cannot wait to continue just tabbing the crap out of it when I reread it. And it was such a great time, and I'm really looking forward to be able to doing that. And the last book that I read in February was, I said I would come back to it, A Time of Dread by John Gwynne. Like I said, this is the first book in his Of Blood and Bone trilogy. This is a spin-off in the same world as The Faithful and the Fallen. And I really liked this book. I didn't like it as much as Malice in the Faithful and the Fallen set. I didn't like it as much. I felt like there was almost not enough time in between where that one ended and where this one began. It did get a little confusing because the regions, some of them combined after what happened at the end of Wrath, and so they changed names. And then there were descendants from our original characters in this book, which I really enjoyed that, and I loved seeing some of the giants come into play in this book that I recognized from those. And I loved that. I thought that was fantastic. He has such an amazing writing style, and he is so immersive in his books and in his writing that I absolutely loved it. And I will be continuing in this, absolutely. I just didn't quite get into this one as much as I did those. I think that might partially be because this is technically the first book in a spinoff, and so I was having to kind of find my footing in names and places again, and knowing like who was who and who's supposed to be descended from the original characters and whatnot. So I felt like I just kind of had to find my footing, and I'm really hoping that when I jump into the next book, because this one did have kind of a slow start to it, but I'm really, really hoping that once I start into the second book that I'm really just going to be able to dive right in and just enjoy the heck out of it as much as I did the original series. So I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. It was still absolutely amazing. Like I said, John Gwynne's writing style is just absolutely phenomenal, and it was so good. And I loved being able to just continue on with this series. I felt like this was in a way kind of sort of an epilogue that I didn't get from those. but it's not exactly. So I did really enjoy this one, and I look forward to going on with the series. Alright, so that is it. Those are the 14 books that I finished, including the 3 books that I DNF'd in January and February so far this year. I have had a great time. January was kind of off to a rocky start, and then February I had so much fun reading the romances and some of these fantasies. I had a really great time. And I look forward to having a lot more books that are just going to be really fun and really just some great reads. I have some amazing ideas planned, and I have a whole crapload of new books that I will hopefully be doing a book haul for you guys any day now from January and February as well. I have 2 book outlet orders from Christmas Money, and just some other ones that I have picked up, some new releases and whatnot. So I am very excited to be able to bring you that soon. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. I am trying to post every Thursday some new content for you guys. I will also link all those videos down in the description box that I have mentioned, including my Judge a Book by the Spine, my romance reading vlog, my Honey Witch reading vlog, and any others. I think that's it. That I've come out with. I talk about some of these books a little bit more in depth. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and have a great reading month for March. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye.